Hello, sixth graders. Welcome to sixth grade math, properties of addition and multiplication lesson. Pause while you write the lesson title in your math notebook. Pause again while you write today's lesson objective in your math notebook. Today's objective is, I can use properties of addition and multiplication to show that expressions are equivalent by completing practice problems with 100% accuracy in multiple attempts. The standards we'll be covering today are 6MEEA3, which is identify equivalent expressions and show that two expressions are equivalent by substitution. We're going to start today's lesson with a vocabulary review and some key ideas. So if you don't yet have your vocabulary done, you need to go ahead and get that done and written in your words worth knowing section of your notebook. The vocabulary we're reviewing is equivalent expressions. Expressions with the same value, like 12 plus 7 and 7 plus 12, are equivalent expressions. You can use the commutative and associative properties to write equivalent expressions. So our key ideas are commutative properties. When we say commutative properties, the definition in words, it is changing the order of addends or factors. So if we're talking about the commutative property of addition, it would be addends. And if we're talking about the commutative property of multiplication, it would be factors. So if we're changing the order of those, it does not change the sum or the product. So some examples are 5 plus 8 equals 8 plus 5, or 5 times 8 equals 8 times 5. And if you're looking at it with variables, so in algebra, it would be a plus b equals b plus a times b equals b times a. Now let's move down to associative properties. The words for that are changing the grouping of addends or factors, does not change the sum or the product. So this is moving parentheses or other grouping symbols around in the product. So when that does not change the sum or the product, then you're using the associative property. So some examples are 7 plus 4 plus 2 with the 7 plus 4 in parentheses, and that is equal to 7 plus 4 plus 2 with the 4 plus 2 in parentheses. And then the same thing, 7 times 4 with the 7 times 4 in parentheses times 2 equals 7 times 4 times 2 with the 4 times 2 in parentheses. And then we have the same thing written with algebra, a plus b in parentheses plus c equals a plus b plus c in parentheses. Or a times b in parentheses times c equals a times b times c in parentheses. Before we look at example 1, I want to read over this study tip with you. It says one way to check whether expressions are equivalent is to evaluate each expression for any value of the variable. In example 1a, if we used x equals 2, so we substitute in 2 for x, we can see that they're equivalent because 7 plus 12 plus 2 equals 21, and 19 plus 2 equals 21 as well. So you can see that those two are equivalent. So let's take a look at our example 1a. So if we're simplifying this expression, we're going to use the associative property of addition, which means we're going to move the parentheses. And so we want to move the parentheses around like terms. So we want to move it so that both of our constants are in the parentheses instead of having a constant and a variable in the parentheses. So once you get into a little bit more difficult math, this is super useful. So you change it from having a mixture of constant and variable to having just constants in the parentheses. And then you can add those constants together. So 7 plus 12 is 19. and then you're going to add that x. So we end up with a simplified expression of 19 plus x. So our step 1 was we used the associative property of addition, and our step 2 was we added 7 and 12. Now remember, you can't add a constant and a variable. They stay as addition, and that is as simplified as that gets. Then we're going to check out letter B. We're also simplifying the expression, and we're doing the same thing. It just has decimals in it, and here we're using both of the two properties that we've talked about, commutative property of addition and associative property of addition. So first, we're going to switch the order of the 6.1 and the x. So we're going to flip those around so you can see that they're in a different order than they were in originally. So 6.1 plus x becomes x plus 6.1. And we do that so that then we can put the parentheses right around the 6.1 plus the 8.4. So that first step, we're using the commutative property of addition. The second step, we're using the associative property of addition. And then we are adding the 6.1 plus 8.4, and we're getting the 14.5. So sometimes we do some of this stuff and we don't even realize that we're using those properties. So be careful. Letter C, we are simplifying the expression 5 times 11y. So that is all multiplication. It's 5 times 11 times y. So it's written that out just the way I said it on this side, on the right-hand side. So we're going to, again, use the associative property of multiplication. So instead of grouping the variable with the constant, we are sort of splitting that up and grouping it so that it's with another variable, so that the constants are together. So we have 5 times 11 grouped together, and we can easily see that 5 times 11 is 55, and then the y just stays off there at the end. It's still multiplied, and then we have a simplified expression of 55 times y. So now we have a couple more key ideas here for you, and they are some that should look very familiar to you. You may not have names for them in your heads, but they are some things that you should be very familiar with. So they are reviews. The first one is the addition property of 0, and that is the sum of any number and 0 is that number. So if you add 7 plus 0, you get 7. So a plus 0 equals a. The second one is actually two properties. It's the multiplication properties of 0 and 1. So we know that those two things are special. Those two numbers are special when we multiply them. So the product of any number and 0 is 0, and the product of any number and 1 is that number. So 9 times 0 equals 0, and 4 times 1 equals 4. So a times 0, so any number times 0 equals 0, and any number times 1 equals itself, or that number, a. So a times 1 equals a. So you're going to go ahead and record these in your notebook so that you will have them. Let's move right along to example 2. We are going to use properties to write equivalent expressions. Letter A, we're going to simplify the expression 9 times 0 times p. So it says we're going to use the associative property of multiplication. So we group the 9 times the 0, and then we leave the p outside the parentheses. So that's our step 1. And then the 0 times the p, so when we multiply the 9 times the 0, we get 0 because That's what happens when we multiply by 0. And then we multiply the 0 times the p, and we still get 0. A quick trick on that one, anytime you see that you're multiplying a string of numbers, if you see 0 in it anywhere, you know that your result is going to be 0. Letter B, we are simplifying the expression 4.5 times r times 1. So using the associative property of multiplication, we're going to group the r times the 1 in parentheses so that it essentially neatens things up for us and makes the 1 go away, because we need to recognize that r times 1 is really just r. So that becomes 4.5 times r. So we used our multiplication property of 1 to simplify that part, and then we multiply 4.5 times r, which equals 4.5 r. Example 3 is our real-life application. Let's read the problem first. It says, you and 6 friends play on a basketball team. A sponsor paid $100 for the league fee, X dollars for each player's t-shirt, and $68.25 for trophies. Write an expression for the total amount the sponsor paid. So let's look over here at this common error. It says you and 6 friends are on the team. So use the expression 7x, not 6x, to represent the total cost of the shirt. So that is actually something that I see quite a lot of, because students like to go through and pick out the numbers and use them without actually reading the words around those numbers. So be careful. So it says you and 6 friends, so that's 7 people, 7 players. So it's asking us to write an expression for the total amount the sponsor paid. It's not asking us how much the sponsor paid. It's asking us to write an expression. So it says add the league fee. So the league fee was $100. The cost of the t-shirts. We don't know how much each t-shirt costs, but we know that there were 7 of them. So 7 times however much each t-shirt cost. And the cost of the trophies, which we know was $68.25. So in order to get our constants together, $68.25 and $100, we are using the commutative property of addition. So we are switching the order of these two terms and making it look like this, 7x plus 100 plus $68.25. So that sort of helps to have those two be neighbors, because then we can easily add $168.25, which we should know is $168.25. And then we've got our plus 7x still there on the front. So our simplified expression is 7x plus $168.25. Here's what you need to do next to finish this lesson. You need to be sure your notes are complete in your ISN, complete your Google form questions, review your lesson if you need to, and complete your Big Ideas math assignment in your Math Spiral notebook. Be sure you submit that when it is 100% correct, not before, and track your progress on your playlist.